Star Wars Jedi Quest: Path to Truth by Jude Watson. Chosen to rise, destined to fall. Anakin Skywalker is no longer a boy, but not yet a man. Almost 13, he has begun to travel on the path that will lead him to glory and infamy. In the mysterious caves of Ilum, Anakin must create his lightsaber after confronting the demons of his past and his future. Once the lightsaber is completed, Anakin joins his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi, on a mission that will cut to the heart of his fear, anger, and power. When Anakin was a young slave on Tatooine, everyone lived in terror of a creature named Crane, who kidnapped slaves for his own profit and killed anyone who got in his way. Now, Crane's evil has grown to a dangerous degree, threatening peace and safe passage throughout the galaxy. Anakin and Obi-Wan must stop Crane. But can Obi-Wan also stop Anakin from seeking vengeance against an old enemy? The path to truth is a clear one. Anakin's path is not. Prologue. No one on Tatooine could remember a day this fine. The two suns shone, but their rays did not blister the skin. The wind blew, but it was a gentle wind that did not bring choking dust and sand. The normally brutal climate had loosened its grip. Most of the moisture farmers, smugglers, and slaves of Tatooine didn't have the time or energy to look up from their hard lives to notice it. 7-year-old Anakin Skywalker did. When his mother, Shmi, opened the windows at dawn, the two of them stood breathing in the fresh air with wonder. For the first time in a long while, Anakin considered himself lucky. Today the weather was good, and he had his first afternoon off. Day after day he was cooped up in Watto's junk shop. He was a slave, but it wasn't the worst job he could imagine. He learned about hyperspace engines and power converters and droid motivators. He could assemble a reactivate switch blindfolded. The only trouble was he had to work for the Toydarian Watto, whose temper and greed constantly surprised Anakin, growing worse by the day. Anakin crammed his breakfast in his mouth as he hurried through the crowded streets of Mos Espa toward Watto's shop. He broke into a run, sliding easily between two careening Eopes. Today, Watto had to make a journey to Anchorhead. He had heard of a spectacular crash between two sand skimmers and a space frigate, and he was anxious to be first to bid for the parts. The trip placed Watto in a bind, for his excitement at the thought of striking a deal battled with his irritation at closing the store for a day. All week, the air had been full of the angry buzzing of Watto's wings and his muttered comments about how life was unfair to hard-working beings like him. Watto couldn't bear to lose money, even for a day. But he didn't trust Anakin to run the shop. Neither could he bear to give his slave a day off. So Watto had left Anakin a long list of chores to do, a list long enough to guarantee that Anakin would be in the closed shop from sunrise to sundown. What Watto didn't count on was that Anakin had friends to help him. Not living beings, everyone he knew his age was a slave too. Anakin considered droids his friends, and he knew that with their help, he could get his chores done in half the time. As soon as he reached the shop, he programmed the droids and got to work. Many of the droids were old models or half-fixed, but he managed to keep them going. By midday, the chores were done. Anakin picked up the pack Shmi had filled with meat pies and fruit that morning. He hurried all the way back to where he lived, breathing deep lungfuls of air as he ran. His friend Amee was a house slave for a rich Tung couple. They gave her one afternoon off a month. This was it. Amee waited outside on the steps of her dwelling in the crowded, layered stack of hovels in Mos Espa. Her chestnut hair was worn in a braided crown around her head. She'd woven some yellow flowers through her braids. It added to the holiday feeling of this day. Her thin face, usually so serious, looked almost pretty as she smiled. "I've never been on a picnic," she said. "Mother says she used to go on them when she was a girl." Amee's mother, Hala, opened the door and smiled at Anakin. Her job was to work on transmitter parts at home. "I'm glad you'll both get to enjoy the day. Don't go far." "I know just the spot," Anakin told her. Amee followed him through the crowded lanes and streets of Mos Espa. There were even more beings packed in the streets today. Amee and Anakin had learned how to move through the streets almost invisibly, avoiding the fierce tempers of the spacers and smugglers. Anakin knew exactly where they should share their picnic, even though he'd never been on one either. He had found the spot weeks before while searching for junked parts on the outskirts of the spaceport. Tatooine's hills were sandy and barren, but nestled among them Anakin had discovered a small canyon. There he found a tree with flickering green-gold leaves. He had never seen the species before, and it was the first time he had seen such a color in a natural form. Tatooine was a land of variations of beige and tan. The tree was scrawny and struggled to survive, but when you sat underneath it and closed your eyes, you could hear the rustle of dry leaves. On a day like today, with the air so fresh you could almost pretend you were on a beautiful green planet. "It's perfect," Amee breathed. They feasted on Shmi's meat pies and Harla's turnovers. They drank sweet juice and planned their futures, which always included Anakin liberating all the slaves on Tatooine. The sun slid lower in the sky. Suddenly, the afternoon was over. "I guess we'd better get back," Anakin said reluctantly. "I hate being a slave," Amee said. She shoved the food wrappings into her pack with unusual force. There wasn't any reply Anakin could make. They all hated being slaves. Anakin vowed that someday Shmi would live a soft, pleasant life, filled with leisure and good things to eat, just like this day. He would see to it. He and Amee slogged through the sandy hills and down into the streets of Mos Espa. To their surprise, the streets were now almost empty, the food stalls shuttered. "What's going on?" Anakin wondered. "It's like there's a sandstorm coming, but the air is so clear." As they got closer to their homes, their unease increased. On the outskirts, they saw shattered entrances and wreckage in the street. They passed a man crying into his hands. Sobs shook his thin shoulders. Anakin and Amee exchanged a wordless glance. The fear that always hummed under the surface of their lives sparked and became a living current. Something was very wrong. A woman ran by them, her eyes streaming tears. "Elza!" she screamed. "Elza!" "Elza Monimi," Amee said, panic beginning to shade her voice. "He's our neighbor. What's happening?" They began to run. Every other house seemed to be damaged. Beings mingled in the streets, asking one another for news of daughters, sons, mothers, whole families. They heard a whispered name, a name repeated over and over in tones of dread and horror. Anakin stopped a neighbor, Titi Cronell. "What happened?" "Slave raid," Titi told him. "Pirates, led by Crane, with blasters and restraining devices. They have transmitters that override our own. They can steal whoever they want. Many were taken." Titi spoke in short bursts, as if he could not manage a whole sentence. Anakin felt his own breath leave him. "My mother." Titi looked at him sadly before rushing on. "I don't know." Without another word, Amee took off toward her own dwelling. Anakin ran, his heart bursting, his legs pumping. He charged into his home. He looked around wildly. Everything seemed the same, but where was Shmi? Then he saw her in the corner. Her knees were drawn up against her chest, her head buried. As he started toward her, she jerked her head up. For a moment he saw sheer terror in her face. Shock paralyzed him. He had never seen his mother afraid. For him, she was the image of calm strength. She held all the terrors of life at bay for him. As she took in his expression, the wild look in her eyes instantly disappeared. The warm light he knew so well came back. She held out her arms to him, and he rushed to her. "I didn't know where you were," she said. He felt her strong arms surround him and buried his face in the familiar scent of her clothes. She rocked him gently. "You're shaking," she said. "Hush, Annie. We're both safe." Somehow he knew that the terror he'd seen on her face was not just because she could not find him. It was because of what she had seen, of what had almost happened to her. But that fear, the fear that his mother could disappear, that she could be hurt or killed, that she could be at the mercy of her own terror, was just too great for him to face. He pushed the thought of her anguished face away and breathed in her warmth, felt the strength and gentleness of her hands soothing him. Instantly, the shaking stopped. He told himself he had not seen her vulnerability. His mother could not be vanquished. She could not be taken. She could not be hurt. The core of her was strength. She could keep them both safe. That was his reality. Somehow Anakin knew that if he acknowledged Shmi's fear, he would close the door on his own childhood. He wasn't ready to do that. He was 7 years old. He needed her too much. Outside, they heard voices. A deep voice calling, trying to override a high, frightened one. "Amee? Come back! Where's my mother?" Anakin looked up. "It's Amee." Shmi's grip on him tightened. "Hala was taken by the slave raiders." He looked into her face. The terror was gone, but sadness was there now. Deep sadness and compassion, and also something else, something remote that he could not decipher. As though she knew something he did not, and would not tell him. He did not want or need to know. "It is a terrible thing to be a slave on Tatooine, Annie," Shmi whispered. "But it could be far, far worse for us." She pushed his hair off his forehead. The remote look left her eyes. "But you are safe," she said in a firm voice. "We are together. Now come. Let us do what we can to comfort Amee and her father." Anakin rose. He stood on the threshold of his dwelling for a moment, watching Shmi cross to console Amee and her father. Owners were now walking among the milling beings, checking on the slaves. Anakin saw Hala's owner, Yor Milto. Milto was checking off something on a datapad. "A nuisance to lose Hala," he said to his assistant. "This will cost me." But she wasn't highly skilled. Easy to replace. Anakin's gaze went to Amee. Her face was buried in Shmi's robes and her thin shoulders shook with her racking sobs. Hala's husband sat nearby, his face in his hands. Easy to replace. Pain tore through Anakin, pain he did not want to face. He made a vow. He knew he had an extraordinary memory. Organization and learning came easily to him. He would use that power to sear this memory into his mind and heart. When he needed this, he would recall every detail, the exact shade of blue of the sky, the heartbreaking quality of Amee's uncontrollable sobs. There was only one thing he would train his mind not to recall, one thing he never wanted to see again, even in memory, the terror he had glimpsed on his mother's face.